Former President Trump will be leaving Mar-a-Lago at about noon today to fly to New York, where he'll be arraigned tomorrow on criminal charges. Mr. Trump is the first former or sitting president to face charges this serious. Congressman Steve Scalise, who is the House Majority Leader, joined other Republicans in defending Mr. Trump, even though we don't know exactly what charges he'll be facing. Congressman, the big news, of course, was the indictment of former President Donald Trump by the Manhattan DA. You came out, as many Republicans did, condemning it very strongly, saying it's a sham. The indictment hasn't been unsealed yet. I mean, how do we know?
Well, first of all, you've been seeing for weeks, this DA just wanted to go after Donald Trump. And I think anybody that looks at this objectively would say, okay, they're saying it was a federal charge that they're going after him on. The feds didn't even go after President Trump on it, and the statute of limitations expired. Well, he is going after state charges. Well, he's trying to find a way to make state charges. The real question you should ask is, if his name was anything other than Donald Trump, do we think this DA would be going after him? By the way, this DA is known and brags about letting hardened criminals out of jail in a city in New York where crime is out of control. So this guy brags about letting hardened criminals out of jail, but he wants to go after Donald Trump. I think everybody knows it's because of his name. Hillary Clinton got a fine, no jail time, no indictment on a very similar charge. So again, if his name was something other than Donald Trump, this wouldn't be a case, and I think most people know it. So is justice really being fair here? I don't think so.
Now, the DA had looked at this about a year ago. He decided not to impanel a grand jury. A lot of his people in his office said they had so much evidence that they quit their jobs. So to wait a year or so, maybe you got more evidence.
Well, again, the federal government chose not to go after it. And this is
while Trump was
President Biden's in office today. Joe Biden's Justice Department chose not to pursue this, and it's a federal charge primarily. So again, if his name wasn't Donald Trump, everybody I think knows they wouldn't even be going after him. A former president has never been indicted. It just seems like when you see the raid on Mar-a-Lago, Joe Biden had classified documents. There was no raid on Joe Biden's home in Delaware. There was no, by the way, there was no leaked photos. Well, there is a different standard that's applied to Donald Trump than anyone else. And again, in America, this isn't a third world country. We know that goes on in other countries. That shouldn't be the case in America, where government can be weaponized to go after political opponents.
Well, there is a difference in the documents found at Mike Pence's property, the documents found at Joe Biden's property.
No, there's not. Not at Joe Biden's property.
No, I understand. There were similar documents. However, when they turned them over voluntarily, and when they said they turned them over, they didn't have to be subpoenaed.
No, go look at what Biden's own attorneys said. There were only these documents, and then they went back in and they found a whole lot more than what Biden's attorneys said. But why did they take his word for it? And why was there no raid? There were no leaked photos. Again, very different standard being applied. And oh, by the way, Joe Biden had some of those documents back to when he was a United States Senator, which a United States Senator is not allowed to have classified documents. Every former president has had classified documents in their possession, and that's a negotiation that happens. It's a very clear double standard. That's what my real concern is. If somebody did something wrong, apply the law equally to everybody. It's clearly not being applied equally here. Well,
and that's just one of a number of investigations. There's a Georgia investigation, a New York State civil suit. There's the special counsel who's looking into January 6th and the Mar-a-Lago documents.
And again, if his name was anything other than Donald Trump, I think everybody knows that wouldn't be going on. Hillary Clinton was found, in essence, guilty of using her money in her campaign to create false documents that tried to create this Russian collusion hoax, which has been disproven. But all of that happened during the 2016 campaign, and she wasn't persecuted and prosecuted over and over again. Let's have justice applied equally to everybody.
All right, well, we're running out of time, but I do want to ask you about the bill you sponsored. It did pass in the House.
Yeah.
And the name of it is?
The Lower Energy Costs Act. Great bill for Louisiana and for the country.
Because you also included in that more revenue for Louisiana, because we're not getting our fair share.
Right. Louisiana gets 37.5% of revenue for drilling offshore. Every state inland gets 50% of the revenue. And so I added language in my bill that would get parity for Louisiana. And by the way, that would mean just yesterday we got a $156 million award for revenue sharing from 2022. we would have gotten an extra $70 million if my bill was law. All that money is used for coastal restoration in Louisiana. So more money for coastal restoration, lower energy costs for families all across America, and better jobs here in Louisiana.
And it did pass in the House with a couple of Democrats. If it gets to the Senate, Chuck Schumer says it's dead on arrival. You said you've been talking to some senators.
Yeah, I've heard from a number of senators, including Democrats, that are very interested in this bill. And so we're going to continue the negotiation. It had to start with passing the bill through the House. There were some that didn't think it could pass the House. So we had a lot of work that was done this week to make sure the bill passed.
You have the Republican majority. You knew it was going to pass.
But we had some members that were against it earlier, and so I helped negotiate some of the agreements we had. There were some Florida members that didn't want any drilling on the Northeast coast members, whether it's New Jersey, New York. They had some issues that we worked out with them. This is a bill that deals with a lot more than oil and gas. It even involves critical minerals. You can't mine in America for computer chips or solar panels or car batteries. Most of that's coming from China. And so in this bill, we address that too, so that we can make more things in America. No one does it cleaner or more efficient in the world than America, yet it was really hard to do that. The Lower Energy Costs Act opens that up.
Well, we'll see what happens when it gets to the Senate. Thank you for coming in.
Go Tigers.
I appreciate that.
Right now, only on 360, a conversation with former Playboy model Karen McDougal about the 10-month-long relationship she says she had with Donald Trump. A relationship, she says, that began in the summer of 2006. McDougal is suing to void an agreement she signed shortly before the 2016 election with the company that owns the National Enquirer, which bought the rights to her story. Her lawsuit says the magazine bought her story, in fact, to kill it, thereby protecting the candidacy of Donald Trump. It's a story that's not been told in full on camera until tonight. And as you know, Karen McDougal is just one of 3 women speaking out just this week about the Donald Trump they say they knew. If we could just start at the beginning, how did you meet Donald Trump?
I met Donald when they were filming The Celebrity Apprentice at the Playboy Mansion. They were filming there, and I was hired as one of the playmates to work at the pool party scene. It was quite fun, actually. And
You'd worked for Playboy for some time.
Yes, after becoming Playmate of the Year, I was required to work so many events with Playboy, and that was one of the events that I thought would be fun, and I worked it, and there were a lot of women there, and we just all had a great time, and that's where we met.
How did you actually meet?
You know, he said hello like he would to anybody, and then throughout the night it was kind of obvious that there was an attraction from his part to me, and I kind of just blew it off.
You could see him looking at you.
Oh, I could see it, and the Playboy bunny, she's like the house mom is what we call her. She actually made a comment like, wow, this guy's really into you. And that's kind of when I started like paying attention, and he was, and I kind of smiled at it, thought it was kind of cute and funny. And then at the end of the night, you know, after striking up many conversations, we exchanged phone. He actually asked me to write my phone number down for him to Keith.
Did you wanted to see him again?
I thought it would be nice to communicate with him and talk to him. I actually at that point didn't consider dating or going out with him, but I did think he's an interesting person. He's brilliant, and I like smart minds, and I think that I was interested in a communication for sure.
So when was the next communication?
I believe we talked right away on the phone, and I think we talked for about a week on the phone before his next visit to LA, and that was his birthday, which I think is June 12th.
Would he call you?
He would call me, I would call him, vice versa.
So you had his phone number?
I have many of his phone numbers, yes.
Do you have a direct number for him, or did you have to go through somebody else?
I have his direct phone number. I have quite a few of the direct phone numbers. I also had his bodyguard Keith's phone number. I had his personal secretary's phone number.
That's Rhonda?
No, at the time it was Twee. I don't know her last name, but I just know her by Twee. But I have all these phone numbers, so if I couldn't reach him on one, depending on where he's going to be, I would call the other.
When he called, did his number show up on the phone?
No, it did not.
It would show up as what?
Gosh, it's been so long, but I think it just showed up as a 212. That's it, just 212.
But like a block number or a
Correct.
No caller ID?
Right, correct.
And what were the conversations like?
The conversations were like any other conversation you have with a nice person. We got along great. We had respect for each other. We had fun. We were funny together. We had a good time. We would talk about anything and everything, from what kind of food do you like to how's your family. He asked me how my family was, to politics, to anything, like just normal everyday life conversations.
When did you actually decide to see him again?
Before, you mean after the June 12th?
Yeah, after the initial meeting and after the phone conversations.
After our first meeting on June 12th, I decided to see him again. Actually, that night I didn't think I was going to see him again because I was a little bit put off. But
Wait, I'm sorry. Was the June 12th? Was that the Apprentice event?
no, that was our first quote unquote date.
Okay, so I'm
Yeah.
sorry. So tell me about your first date.
Our first date, I was told we were going to go to the Beverly Hills Hotel for dinner. So he had told me that Keith, his bodyguard, was going to pick me up at a certain time, and he did. And then we were driving over to the Beverly Hills Hotel, and Keith drove around to the back, and he said, we have to get out here because we don't want to walk through the hotel. And at that minute, I'm like thinking to myself, are we going to a room? Because I thought we were having dinner at the Beverly Hills Hotel.
In the actual restaurant.
Right. Well, we did have dinner at the Beverly Hills Hotel, but in his bungalow instead. We had dinner there for a few hours. We talked for a few hours. We had a great time. We were getting to know each other. We were talking about his birthday. And then as the night ended, we were intimate.
When you got to the Beverly Hills Hotel and Keith said, we're not going to go through the lobby, we're going to go, was it to a room at the Beverly Hills Hotel or a suite or?
It was a bungalow in back.
A bungalow.
It's the one he said he always stayed at. And in fact, every time that I met him there, it was the same exact bungalow. And he's called it the nicest bungalow they had. So I guess that's why he chose that one. But that's where we went every time.
Were you concerned when you realized you're not going to go out to dinner, you're actually going to be eating in the bungalow?
I think that first night I was concerned because I wasn't expecting to go to a hotel room or bungalow, whatever you want to call it. I actually thought we were going to dinner, so I was a bit concerned. And I think at that moment is when I realized maybe something else is going on. You know, I'm a smart girl. I probably could have figured it out, but I really wasn't thinking. I think I was so nervous to actually meet with him in general that it kind of just didn't even, think. It wasn't in my thought process at that moment. I was just too nervous to actually meet him. So
Were you attracted to him?
I was attracted to him. Yeah, he's a nice-looking man, and I liked his charisma. I think I love great posture. He's got great posture, and